Hello, and welcome to the June Fire Chief's video message for 2019. As we end the school year, as we begin summer, joining me today, Ty DeMint, EMS 704 on the A shift. Thank you very much, Ty, for joining me.
Thanks for having me today, Chief.
Absolutely. In the last few weeks and months, there's been some changes with the MDC. We've added that Leave Hospital button. So as one of the EMS supervisors, what has that button done, or what has changed with that button for you, and how do you use hospital status of EMS units to help your situational awareness?
Well, Chief, one of the things that the EMS duty officer does is keep a good track of where the units are at all times, whether they are on the scene or transporting, arrived at hospital, whether they're transferring care at the hospital or they're available on the radio for service. So having that Leave Hospital button allows us to better gauge where that unit is, whether they're actually at the hospital or whether they're moving from the hospital back to their first due area or returning resources back to their assignments.
And that's exactly part of the equation, returning resources. You know, sometimes it may be the medic to their station, sometimes it may be the medic to an adjacent station, sometimes it may be more than just one party that's being returned, it's multiple people. It could also be equipment. And that was a part of the equation. Sometimes the unit is in their first due area at the hospital, sometimes the unit is in their battalion at the hospital, but then other times the units are far from their battalion, far from their first due area when they're at the hospital. A 5th Battalion unit goes to Suburban. A 3rd Battalion unit goes up to MedStar Montgomery General. So the nuance was when a unit would leave Suburban, remaining status arrived at hospital, and in traffic be trying to traverse 270 northbound to get north of Route 118, that entire time frame was being captured as at hospital time. And part of this is data, and one of the things we talk about data is why the data is important. Because when we're looking at the hospital drop time, turn time, and how long the call took, when the unit is in travel back to their station response area, that's part of the call, but it's not part of the hospital time. And we've seen a very significant difference with the F9 leaving hospital button allowing that. So as EMS supervisor, how do you see that playing out and enabling you see, when you look at the screen, less resources showing up at your hospitals?
Chief, one of the things that we're using now is the First Watch app to allow us to better gauge exactly where these units are and how long it's actually taking them to transfer care. So we don't want that time to be captured in them going back to the station. We want more accuracy when we're looking at those gauges.
And that again, if it's 5 minutes to get from the hospital back to the first due, back to the battalion, that's 5 minutes. But if it's 30 minutes or more, that time is buried in there. And there was a few questions that came out when the GO first hit the street about, do I have to do Leave Hospital and then AOR when I'm in my own response area, when I'm in my battalion? And the best answer is repetition and consistency. If you are a Station 16 EMS unit or Station 1 EMS unit, you're able just to go AOR. But when you do transport to Suburban, if you just do AOR, you're negating that value. So that feedback was always do it, even if it's a tap. Tap leaving hospital when you do start to drive away from the ambulance bay, and then if you are in your battalion, tap AOR, and allow that data point to be captured each time, so that it's normalized. So again, if you're leaving MedStar, DC, or if you're leaving shock trauma, still, leave hospital, get back to your battalion AOR. One of the biggest problems or biggest questions that came out of that button is, what does it do for ECC? And the current parameter is 2 minutes. You know, guys and gals on these units having situational awareness is important, as it is throughout our entire workday and our entire career. And when we're traveling back to our first due area in our battalion, we may not have the area knowledge to recognize that street name.
Certainly.
We may hear a unit from Station 23 going to a call, not recognize that it's 1 block off of Old Georgetown Road in the Democracy
Certainly.
area, and ambulance 708 is, you know, so proximally close to that. That's what this GPS enables us to do. ECC now sees that resource, where they're located at, and can say, Montgomery Ambulance 708, you know, I need you to go on this situation in lieu of that unit. And our guys and gals would never have known that that street address was
Exactly.
right behind the Wildwood Shopping Center,
Right.
and they were so proximal to that.
Right.
But ECC has that situational awareness. And, you know, 6 months ago, ECC would have thought that they were still sitting at McKinley Street.
Right.
And there's a huge change there.
Huge difference.
And that's a big part of that. What is the role that you see about situational awareness with our radios in the AB, or Alpha and Bravo situation, as you carry 2 radios around a day when you're working, 1 man unit, but you're carrying the ability to monitor more than, you know,
Exactly.
one concurrent radio. How do you see the best solution of that on a 2-person EMS unit?
Well, that raises a great point, Chief, because having 2 providers there means that both providers at all times should have their portable radios with them, even when transferring patient care. One of those providers should be still on the Bravo channel where the call was originally, you know, monitored. In addition to that, the driver of that unit should have that operational awareness as well as the situational awareness to know that there are other things going on.
And that's absolutely balanced. And the balance there is, when they're on the scene together, they both need to be able to communicate to each other.
Yes.
You know, if I'm with the patient, you've gone outside to get other resources from the unit, and there's a question asked, or there's a transmission from me about other circumstances, you hear it. So, you know, when you and I are tactically on the scene with the patient, you know, Bravo and Bravo, or, you know, whatever the right channel is, Golf or Charlie or whatever, is clearly the point. But as you say, once we've started transport, specifically when we're at the hospital, that situational awareness of saying, hey, Ty, the county's gone crazy.
Yeah.
You know, there's this, you know, MCI up the street, or they've gone to condition red. You're going to hear that at some point on the Bravo, but when one's listening to Alpha while he's restocking the EMS unit, cleaning up, while you're doing your PCR, while you're on the other channel, it is that situational awareness before you have to call the hospital to say, hey, can you shake ambulances out of there, or ECC's calling the hospitals saying, can you shake resources out of there, guys and gals, because things are ongoing. What do you see as the change on that awareness and those resources? Anything else to talk about the F9 button leaving hospital, and how EMS crews can help EMS supervisors in functions?
Certainly. We really like this leave hospital button, Chief, because it does allow that additional time to be added while these resources start moving about. As we discussed earlier, we don't run just one call at a time. We're running several calls at a time. For the providers to know not only what's going on with their particular call, but what's going on with other calls around them is extremely important from a situational awareness standpoint.
Right. And to situational awareness, it's always important for the crews to communicate to you all when they're in that stacked up queuing process.
Yes.
You know, you can look at the screen and think that there's a circumstance going on at Hospital X, but you know, it's very much incumbent upon the EMS crews that are there when they've hit that mark, when they've been waiting for that period of time, and what, just give them that reminder where that mark is and when they should be, you know, reaching out to you.
Yeah. We are actually monitoring how many units are at the hospital at any given time so that we can better manage which hospitals need to be on certain colors per se, and helping in a joint decision with the staffing in the emergency departments to better facilitate a more a smoother transition of care, which allows the patient to be seen and treated faster. So with that said, these buttons actually allow us to monitor via First Watch exactly what's happening and the time that it's taking for
And
that to take
while
place.
they're waiting for a bed assignment and the patient's still on their cot,
Certainly.
they need to call you.
Yeah.
They need to call Montgomery and give that heads up. So you all can, as you're juggling 3 to 4 hospitals, as you're juggling, you know, half the county, you're able to help those crews quickly once the circumstances start, you know, multiplying and expanding. What is the next evolution, or the next thing that you see, you know, impacting the EMS resources in the units out there?
Well, certainly we are doing a phenomenal job now at recognizing these priority calls quickly. So having resources available on a particular ambulance, case in point, ambulance 715 has an upgraded paramedic from paramedic engine 712. So they're moving with an ALS resource back to 12's area. So they immediately, upon leaving the hospital, hit the F9 button, the leave hospital button. ECC sees that, but they don't know that that resource is with that particular ambulance.
Situational awareness of the ambulance.
Situational awareness now comes into play. There's a priority 1 call dispatched in 16's area. So that's where the situational awareness comes in. That unit is not in its first due area. They're not in their battalion at that point. So they're not going to be recommended for that call. However, they may be closest.
Right. And
So-
part of that is when they did that upgrade, it was for a low acuity Charlie. It was a call that required to monitor and the red bag, and the crew decided to take the monitor and the red bag, but forgot the other 2 bags.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And that's critical because the resource of the ALS provider involves all 4.
All 4 bags.
And it's important every time because, as you just said, that example, that next call could be one of our own,
Sure.
could be a patient that is in need of the advanced respiratory capabilities. And without that 3rd, 4th bag, without the rest of the airway bag, our medic is working at a deficit because he or she doesn't have their tools and their toolkit. So every time the provider transitions from the car or the AFRA to a transport unit, the guidance, the necessity is all 4 go.
Yes.
Even though the patient that we're treating at this moment in time is not in need of. And there's no doubt. One of the things that we talked about that is important for the viewers who watch us, who are part of, Montgomery County Fire Rescue, we know that we're technicians, we're medical providers, but your phrase was clinicians.
Certainly.
Go ahead and go into that and expand on that.
Yeah, I like that because our training now is so intense. Our training is providing us not only with how to respond and treat medical emergencies, but our training now has evolved into giving us some grassroots education on how the patient got to this point. So we're doing more than just treating signs and symptoms now. We're actually diagnosing and treating that patient, and we're not only treating what we're seeing, we're treating not up to the emergency department door, but through the emergency department door.
Right. And that's a definite change as the science, as the protocol, as the medical system in Maryland has expanded. It is very much a changing role of ALS provider. Yourself as an ALS provider for more than a minute. We won't say how many years, but that's as we would have in the past treated a symptom and reacted. Now, as you say, we're treating a disease, we're diagnosing a circumstance, and it's a different change.
Yes.
And that's why it's important. There is such a heavy involvement of EMS administration from the county to the state level. What the folks in the EMIHS office are doing is presenting case information, presenting data-based points to Dr. Delbridge and the medical director and the folks at MIMS and the protocol review committee to outline why something should change or why there needs to be an addition of medicine or addition of a protocol. And that's specifically driven by the end users capturing information.
Certainly.
So I appreciate their patience as they're filling out a PCR, but that data is constantly being used to improve the medical system within the state, within the county. So understand that the idea that they have is very important. So when someone says, well, why do we do this or why don't we do that? I really do want them to take that extra moment, formulate that idea, talk to one of their EMS DOs when you come around and visit. When you hear that idea, you're going to give them the backstory or the additional information, or you're going to help them, formulate that idea, and you're going to pass it on to the folks in this section, because that could be, in a little bit of time, one of the catalysts to have a change made. And it really goes to the importance of people making their comment known, their suggestion known, and as an organization supporting that suggestion and moving it forward.
Right.
So,
in addition to that, Chief, we're not only taking our patients to the closest hospital, but we're taking patients to the closest appropriate facility, because a lot of times the closest hospital may not be the best suited hospital for their needs. When I arrive on the scene now, it's not uncommon to see a provider with his or her cell phone in their hand, and they're accessing one of the resources that we have available to us to use chats to determine what the hospital statuses are, and again, what the closest hospital is for that patient's needs. And they're sharing that information with the patient so a decision can be made.
Oh, it's an informed decision.
An informed decision, right, which may at times take that patient further away than the closest facility.
Right, absolutely. And we do strive to support the patient's desires.
Absolutely.
Within medical, confines. And it's a benefit of customer service, but it's also a benefit of outlining that they would be best suited if they go here versus there. We were just in a meeting yesterday talking about ROSC rates, and you know, Bob Lindsay is beginning his retirement. He was very much one of our pushers in this front. Our ROSC rates is creeping over 40% as he measures it shift by shift. There's clearly some impact that the medical conditions we're facing, some of the people we're running as working codes have a high mortality and morbidity rate, that person had a very limited opportunity or resuscitation window. But with year-long rates in the upper 30s and month-to-month rates in the 40s now, and one shift had a month rate right over 50 just recently, it is a clear trigger, a clear part to high-performance CPR, the change in protocol for how we're doing it. But as I've been saying, I'm going to keep saying it, it's hands-only, citizen CPR, AED, all of that is a part of this chain, and it's very paramount that getting that ALS provider there is secondary to getting the CPR or the BLS provider there, and the AED that may come with the fire resource, or the AED that has come with the citizen or the police officer resource. And all of this is this group chain that builds up, and the ability to have ROSC numbers of such great order is a great honor to have within your organization, but a true testament to everybody within your organization, from the call takers at ECC through every field provider and doing patient care. So my hat's off, tip of a hat to all the folks there.
Thank you, Chief. What we're seeing now is the entire crew responding are now engaged in this patient. While they may not all be touching the patient, they are all in some form or fashion engaged in that incident, with the mindset now that we're going to save the patient within 30 minutes. So you now have officers who are timekeepers. They're making sure that our 2-minute intervals are on point. These cardiac arrest events are driven by BLS interventions.
Absolutely.
These are BLS calls with ALS working around those BLS skills. So certainly the combined efforts now and the mindset now of the providers as they're responding, deciding how and who is going to do what on these scenes is giving us these higher scores.
And it's absolutely, as I said, kudos and credit to everybody picking that up and getting that pit crew, as we've talked about, but getting that teamwork together towards that patient outcome.
Well, Chief, this is also a result of not only the units on the scene, but a lot of hard work that's done by our quality assurance programs and our quality improvement, which gives us some feedback after each one of these types of incidents. So we're getting some feedback, we're learning from the things that we could have done better, and we're improving on them each time.
Well, and here shortly, more of that quality assurance is going to be enabled to you as the DO.
Exactly.
And that's going to allow what you all used to see in a day or by next shift coming
Same
from
day.
Bob, it's going to be coming from you that day, you know, and that's just going to provide that feedback loop to all the folks that were on that call. And it's a great capability for us to take that lesson, because it may be an 8 o'clock in the morning call, and how we can refine that and use that later in the same shift to improve patient for the next patient. So good job. Anything else to add with EMS?
No. Certainly, that ambulance seat is probably one of the hottest seats in this department. It engages more people than anybody else that day. It's a very, very important position, and we're holding those folks accountable for their actions, and we are certainly empowering them to make great decisions over the course of the day and pulling in the necessary resources that they need in a moment's notice in order to mitigate these emergencies. And that's what we're seeing out there. And these folks are making really good decisions, and they are having that operational and situational awareness that they are actually bidding on calls where they know that that first due unit should be there, but there's traffic over there or something. Something that tells them that they could actually get there sooner, or they could bring that second ALS resource there a lot faster.
Absolutely. Yep. And it's all part of that team, and how that's you used the phrase, not a sequential calls, it's concurrent and simultaneous calls that are occurring. So thank you very much for what you do on a daily basis. Thank you for what all the EMS duty officers do, how the EMIHS section is progressive and making the difference to both the state level, but to the county providers and the patients, the residents. It was a great opportunity just 2 weeks ago, our quarterly provider recognition activity, and Laura has done a good job with that. So as we roll into summer and engage with the hazy, hot, and humid days, we got to always make sure that we're ready. The summer's upon us, the schools are about ready to close, traffic may get a little lighter, traffic dynamics are going to change, but we're always busy, 350 calls a day, 250, 275 of those calls result in a patient transport each day, and how that is critical to those residents and the visitors to the county. Summer of safety, we've already rolled through Memorial Day. We're going to be kicking off the other components of summer activities, and pools as well as fireworks is right around the corner. Grilling safety, so as Ty said, engagement with the residents, engagements with the folks. Every time you're running that call, be it a fire call, an EMS call in a residential structure, checking that smoke detector. Correction, smoke alarm, as we're tattling them now. Check that smoke alarm to make sure it's functional. Try to make sure that's within the 10-year service, and provide that. July 1, 2019, right around the corner, Montgomery County's carbon monoxide alarm kicks in, and Pete and I were talking about that here in a video recently. So take care. Until next month, have a good day.